Hi everybody, welcome back to the Menshik Club, and uh, continuing the series of study videos and also continuing the series on Julien Vandiest, who is a composer whose work I really love. Um, I had talked a little bit earlier about his background, and so I won't repeat that information in this video. If you want to see that, you can go back. But he did love to compose studies where, number one, there was reduced material, and number two, there were still queens on the board. And these are positions that tend to be pretty drawish most of the time. We think of these positions as easy to draw because if there is a weaker side, they can use their queen to just check indefinitely. And he was interested in finding sort of the marginal positions where, in fact, you could conjure up a win out of a seemingly pretty drawish position. So this is one of his studies. It's actually a correction of an earlier study that he did. The correction comes from 2017, and so that's why you see the dual attribution to Vandiest and Samilo and the later date. But this is a really beautiful study. I'm going to allow you to pause and just think about it. It is white to play and win. So I'll give you a moment if you'd like to take a crack at it and pause the video. You may now. So if you're ready to see the solution, here it is. The key move here is queen to d5. And obviously black's king is in a box. It's a little bit vulnerable, and but black, at least for the time being, does have an extra piece. Even if that b6 pawn drops, it's just going to be a one pawn advantage. So the position still looks like black ought to be able to hold it. But in fact, it is a win for white. It's just not clear how that would happen. So first I want to look at a move that seems pretty obvious, and that's queen g7 check. The first instinct we always have in queen endings is to start checking if we're trying to draw. But in this position, it actually is very bad for black, because after king takes c6, we see another theme that comes up a lot in queen endings, and that's setting up an X-ray check, or a situation where you might be able to answer a check with a check. So here there's a discovered attack looming with the queen on d5, sort of pointing through to the king on a8. So queen b7 check is going to be met by king to d6. And what we see now is that black's queen is now pinned. So an exchange is forced. And unfortunately, if you do this, then you just have a lost king and pawn ending for black, because this pawn is not advanced enough, and this pawn is just going to march through and queen. So queen to d5 can't be answered with queen to g7 check. So black does need to do something, and so they play king to a7, and this looks like it should be good enough. After queen takes c6, which is pretty obvious, now there's two obvious threats. One is just queen takes queen, so black does something stupid. And there's a second obvious threat, which is queen a4 mate, and also queen b7 mate. So we can see that trading queens just allows the e-pawn to just walk through. This pawn on b6 is not going to be fast enough to create another queen by the time that white queens. And so the only real option for black is to start checking. So we get queen g7 check and queen d7. This is kind of an echo of that earlier line with the check on the diagonal, the discovery, because now there's a discovery set up here. But it doesn't look like it ought to be any good because queen takes e5 check. Now black is actually the one who's a pawn up. This is what I think is so fun about this study, is that now, you know, black is maybe thinking, oh, this is a 2-result game. Either I win or, worst case scenario, I draw. But in fact, it's still winning for white. It's pretty incredible. So king to c6 check. And you can see that black does not have king to a8 or king to b8, because either one of these squares, you're just going to go queen b7 mate. So king to a6 is forced. And now we get queen to d3 check. Initially, it doesn't look like it's much. But then you start trying to find a good reply for black, and it's really not easy. One reply that's not adequate is king to a5, because then it's just mate in one, queen a3. And so you can sort of try this. You run into the same thing, basically. So after b5, queen a3 is mate. And that really only leaves king to a7. And after king a7, this looks like it ought to be good enough, but we just keep harassing black's king. Queen a3 check. Now, black would sort of like to maybe play queen a5. Unfortunately, that's one possible mate. And if instead king to a6, black's queen actually gets in the way, and we get queen b7 mate on that square. And so after queen a3 check, king b8 is forced, and white just keeps the checks up. And it's sort of, again, you know, this is not a position where you would necessarily expect there to be a win. It just looks like a series of checks, but in fact, white is maneuvering black into position to deliver mate. And now queen a5 is in fact forced. We get another check. Now this is where it gets really, really insane. Black has an option in b5, and this is the really gorgeous move. I'm going to let you pause and see if you can find it. The move is queen c5, and in this position, a pawn down, white actually has black in a zugzwang. And it's a zugzwang because the king has no moves. The queen has no moves because, for instance, if, let's say, queen a4, hold on, then queen b6 mate. If queen d8, we just get mate in 2. Finally, if b4, we get queen c4 check. King A7, Queen F7 check, and it is again mate next move. So B5 is ruled out by this move, Queen C5, and you have a Zugzwang. It's absolutely stunning. I mean, there can't be very many positions like this. So after Queen C4 check, the only move is King A7. And now, unfortunately for Black, they've just walked into the same checkmate. So I love this study. It really, it is, none of this is terribly obvious, at least to me. Maybe it is to you. But all these possibilities sort of lurking under the surface of this position that looks like it ought to be just a dead draw. I really just love this. And many of Vandiest's studies do turn out like this. Many of them do have, many of them do feature quiet moves like Queen to C5 that are very unexpected. Sometimes it's a king move in the middle of like this position where it looks like there ought to be 1,000 checks. But we'll continue to look at some of these positions later. There's a lot more of his studies that I want to introduce you to. And so until next time, I will wish you well.